Welcome to Three, a show about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic and part of the Tennis Channel podcast network. I'm Gil Gross with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. It is time for the last event of the year. Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic are at the ATP Finals in Turin, Italy, or Torino, as the Italians would obviously call it. They are in separate groups, and on today's show, we are going to preview Djokovic and Rafa as they approach this year-end championship. So Djokovic is in group red. They haven't named it after former players. They've done colors like Christmas, red and green. Djokovic is in red with Rublev, Medvedev, and Tsitsipas. Nadal is in green with Ruud, Auger-Aliassime, and Fritz. Before we break down every single head-to-head that we are going to see in this group stage, which I'm looking forward to, let's talk in more general terms. First, Novak Djokovic, who's won this many times, Joel, but hasn't won it since 2015. Do you feel motivationally like, well, first of all, why do you think it's been since 2015 after having so much success at this event?
It's interesting the ebbs and flows this event takes for people. I think there was this period where it was mattered exceptionally so to Novak. It was kind of like a capstone to some great years he had in the first half of the prior decades. And it still does. I mean, that's not it as much as maybe some other guys have risen a little bit more. I mean, in the big picture, I think it's just guys have risen to the occasion. And I wondered if maybe Novak was a little more fatigued after some of his years. And that just kind of happens. That said, I think this year, I think he'd really like to make a big statement here. I think he's somewhat more motivated because he's only played 44 matches this year. So he'd like usually by now he's played, let's say, 70. And so I think he'd like to really validate once and for all that he is the preeminent contender.
I think this year is a year that he'd probably like to win it because he wasn't able to play so many tournaments this year. And I think that the event itself is a great event. And as much as I complain about the length of the calendar, I'm really looking forward to it next week because it really is the top players in the world at this sport narrowed down. Of course, we have the injury to the world number one, the current world number one, but still, even that doesn't take the bloom off of it because there's so much talent there and it's really narrowed down and refined and it's just the best of the best. I do think there's motivation for Novak to try to push through and win this, even though it won't mean that he could get the year-end number one this year, not this year.
Yeah, I'm in the same place. I think more and more as Novak's career has gone on, I think he's found it difficult to motivate himself outside of the majors, or at least to, peak physically outside the majors. We've seen some of these Masters 1000s events are not at odds with that. Like if you look at a Rome where he's done very well, it's right before Roland Garros. He feels, that kind of, he feels RG kind of as that, straight ahead like finish line, and he's played very well at a Masters 1000 like that, but yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. 2016 2017 both with some injury issues, but yeah, he's won it 5 times in total, none since 2015. But I agree, motivationally this feels like it's going to be a little bit of a better spot for him to do well. Rafa, on the other hand, hasn't won it. I think we covered this a lot a year ago, but I guess we should kind of bring it up again. Amy, why do you think this title has escaped Nadal throughout his career?
I think it's just the conditions. This is not his best surface, a fast hard court, and maybe the time of year, because as we know, his brand of tennis is extremely taxing on the body. And by the time November rolls around, whether his brain is ready for a break or not, his body is ready for a break. And there's really no fighting Mother Nature. That said, he has the opportunity potentially to grab the year-end number one, and he's here. He's going to play it. So I definitely wouldn't count him out.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a little bit more opening opportunity incentive for Nadal, despite not having played much since the US Open one match. But I think that's appealing. And for all his statements about not wanting to that, if he was 4 or 5 in the rankings and okay, but it's close, it's possible. And that would be amazing. Think of Nadal year end number 1 in 3 different decades. That's pretty darn good.
The height of bounce has always been very low at on these courts, and it's the same courts that they played at the O2 transferred to Turin, as far as I can tell, which is generally how it goes when you have an event like this. They're not going to change the courts, and I think that's bigger than the speed. I've always thought that. I think, when the forehand just doesn't bounce off the court, you're going to have, Nadal's going to have a lot more issues, and the same goes for some other aspects of his game. The backhand too, I think, benefits from a higher bounce. And these players who play with more aggression and lower margins, they are elevated, and Nadal is not. And I think, Joel, you've said this in the past. It might not be that Nadal plays worse indoors, but his opponents are playing better.
Well, they have a chance to do that. They hit on, again, and it's so much different than playing at a major where you have to do it over the course of a 3 out of 5 set outdoors. Here, it's a controlled environment. They can almost, I've always thought that just about anyone at around the same level can play 1.7 good sets against anyone and maybe kind of eke their way through to a win and be in that streaky mode. There's such a interesting event. You play 3 matches in a round robin. So there's kind of a 2 out of 3 indoors, scheduled times. There's a lot of nice things that make it favorable, perhaps more for the underdog.
All right, let's go through these head-to-heads. And we'll start with Rafa, with everyone in his group. Amy, you got first dibs, and I'm kind of surprised at who you chose. You wanted to talk about the Rafa Ruud matchup, which obviously we saw at the Roland Garros final. Why did this match pique your interest?
I'm going to be real honest with you. I first picked Djokovic Tsitsipas, and I didn't want to hog all the best matchups. So to be nice to you guys, I took one of the most boring ones. That's the reason I took Rafa Ruud. I'll just go over it real quickly. Of course, they've only met once, which was at the final of Roland Garros this year. And for anyone who thought it might be a good match, it wasn't. Ruud was kind of shell-shocked or awed by the occasion. It's no secret that he loves Nadal. He's worked out at his academy in Mallorca and has patterned some aspects of his game after Nadal. And it was a straight set, very clear, straightforward victory for Rafa. That being said, Rafa may not be 100%. We know that. The last match, though, with Tommy Paul that he lost, remember we brought it up on the last episode, or Gil, you did, and said, what happened to Rafa in those last few games? Well, it came out in a press conference this week that he actually vomited. He wasn't feeling well, and he left the court and vomited a short time later. So don't know if it was a stomach bug, food poisoning, whatever, but it's true that he was not feeling good. So if he had been completely healthy for that match, who knows the outcome? Tommy Paul was playing a great match. But in terms of just this matchup, Rafa and Ruud, Ruud has a very top spinny backhand, and I just, on this surface, that's not going to do well. I think it's going to sit up right in Rafa's strike zone, and Rafa just has a few more all-court skills than Ruud does at this particular point in his career. He's been around the hard courts. He's been around the fast courts. So I would give Rafa the edge here if he is feeling healthy.
Ruud might be the player with the lowest expectations coming into this event, even though he's the 4 seed. I don't know, Ruud or Fritz, I think, would be the center of that debate. Maybe some could argue Andre Rublev. One thing I do want to point out about Casper Ruud, this event is all about beating top players. And in 2022, versus top 10 players. Casper's 2-4. In his career, he is 6-19. So although he's kind of just risen, to be a top player, there is not that much history of Casper being very, very dangerous against top players. And I also agree about the backhand thing. Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what the whole ebb and flow of this kind of event is like. We're thinking about expectations, and yeah, Fritz, I guess, is kind of like the lucky loser because Alcaraz dropped out, so Fritz gets in as he was 9 and now he moves to 8. So that's right. That's how Taylor got in, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I think all these guys with their expectations, I think this gets to sort of my thinking about this event as a little bit of an all-star game. Not that they're not going to try, but it's kind of like I'm playing for 90 minutes to 2 hours indoors. I know exactly what time I'm playing. It's a controlled environment. It's a nice check. So it's a different dynamic, plus or minus, than the tournament mode.
I'm not talking, though, about Casper's expectations.
Right, but I'm just talking about the whole way the player conducts business in this tournament. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Casper's so-so record against top players. I don't think it goes out the window in a tournament like this, but it kind of goes on the porch. It's just kind of like, it's kind of a whole different kind of thing than it's something different. There's something about this event, and maybe it's winning your first match in the round robin. That puts you in a good place. Then you notice maybe sometimes a guy who's never played it before, it's miserable for him. It's almost like the cascade of it is all too much. So I don't know. I know I'm kind of talking in circles around this, but I think even the expectations are different. It's kind of got a bonus quality to it. It's kind of got that's why the all-star game part.
Yeah.
It's not gonna hurt. It's not gonna hurt to go 0-3 in this.
It's not gonna hurt like in terms of like looking back on someone's year. I see what you mean. Versus like losing in the first round of the US Open.
Yeah.
No, or losing 3 straight first round matches in 3 tournaments. That's more painful than losing 3 in 3 days here.
I agree with that.
And walking away with a nice check for a year spent in the top 8.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Casper Ruud, I mean, he's really struggled since the US Open. I mean, I don't think indoor hard court suits him. I don't think anybody would argue that, but he's 2-2 is his overall record if you take out his wins at Davis Cup and Laver Cup over Jack Sock.
That Jack Sock thing, I believe, was a 3-set. It was pretty close. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he's got wins over Nicholas Jarry and Richard Gasquet. He's lost to Jaume Munar. He's lost to Nishioka, Wawrinka, and Musetti. So that's another thing about Ruud coming into this event. I mean, he just hasn't shown us anything in the last 2 months, really, since the U.S. Open. So Nadal will, of the two, that will probably be the matchup that's most favorable to him. I'll go now. My player with Rafa is Felix. Felix has won 16 of his last 17 matches. Holger Rune broke the win streak, 16 straight wins, 3 straight titles in the semifinal of Paris-Bercy. It's interesting to think about, does the week off for Felix, is that much needed rest or is that momentum broken? How do we think about momentum in this kind of case? Does it exist? Does it not exist? So that's one thing to talk about. The good news for Rafa tactically is that Felix is a weak backhand. It's looked a lot better since the US Open, but if you force Felix to hit a lot of backhands, generally you start to get some misses, you start to get some attackable balls. It's a good thing if you get him hitting backhands. The bad news for Rafa is that Felix does have the firepower on an indoor hard court to keep Nadal defending. And you could see something, pretty similar to what Tommy Paul did with the attacking style, keeping Nadal defending, using the inside-out forehand for Felix into Nadal's forehand corner. You can see Felix just being the better server, and these things matter in these conditions. And lastly, Felix played Rafa really well at Roland Garros. That was a 5-setter. We were all very impressed with FAA's performance in that match.
Yeah, a lot of people thought that should be the final. That they wish that had been the final. I just think that Felix, to your point about what momentum, how is that going to be? Remember, he did win that Swiss indoors. He beat Rune, and then he lost to Rune in Paris. So he's had a lot of indoor hard court experience recently. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll actually
Oh
be
no,
really,
he's the hottest player on tour. I mean, he won
yeah,
Rotterdam too. If you go back, I'm saying
yeah,
the week off, is it a good thing? That's my question.
yes,
Is it a good thing
yes.
or a bad thing?
I think it's a great thing, and that be due to all the plethora of indoor hard court that he's had, he'll be in good form. It should be just about right.
I'm going much needed rest all day. There's no question to me. I mean, that would be 5 straight weeks of tennis, and he'd be. I think it's great that if he had. I think it's great. There's no momentum. I think is at a certain level, particularly when he won 3 straight tournaments, is a bit of an illusion. It's like he took a quantum leap up with his tennis this fall. We all know that. In some ways, he's more buoyed by having won 3 straight tournaments than extended Nadal to 5 sets 6 months ago on clay. So I think that's exciting. I think also maybe if he's whether he's tired or fresh, I think he should feel they could swing away. He has less of a thing to prove. Not that that's so big. It's like he won 3 tournaments. That's a pretty darn good autumn, and now he should just feel good and let himself play. I was impressed by how much more depth he was getting on the ball throughout the fall. Before, he struck me as sometimes hitting hard but short, and now I think he's really understanding his game more. I mean, I was almost surprised. The Rune match was kind of surprising, but Rune kind of took it to him, and Felix definitely looked weary in that match, the Paris indoor one.
I mean, Gil, you said he was the hottest player on tour. Arguably, yes, but the other hottest player on tour who's not even here would be Rune. So, to go 1-1 against him in recent weeks is pretty doggone good.
Yeah, it's absolutely between those two. Novak can make a pretty good case as well because he was on an enormous winning streak until Rune beat him in the Paris final.
Hmm.
Okay, I think we can move on to the next one. Actually, one more thing on Felix that I think is just worth throwing out there. It is his first tour finals, and I do think that there's often a bit of a learning curve at this event. Some sensory overload, maybe some big brother, little brother things going on. I think it's a lot to take in. So that's just something I think, everything that Felix has shown on the court, you think he's going to have a great ATP finals. I do think that's a challenge to play it for the first time.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. That was the thing I was talking about earlier, that the first time you see a lot of people, you look back at Novak, you look at a lot of players, not always, but it happens more for the ones who arrive slamless, and then they're in this thing, they've gotten in it, but they also know, oh wow, I'm playing a top 8 guy today and a top 8 one tomorrow, and I'm not playing anyone ranked 72 tomorrow. So the weight of it all, I think it's always nice to see a newcomer, let's say if they win their first match. It's like you guys you ever play doubles where you rotate where you play with 3 other people and everyone plays with one other partner?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I always feel like I want to win that first one so I can be on the board. I don't want if I don't win the first one, I worry about losing the second, and then by the time you see
Yeah.
it's kind of that's the little mini momentum of the week
You don't want to be that one person that lost all.
Yeah, well,
The commonality of the,
it's like
yes.
I've had times where one person's 2-0 and I'm 0-2, and I said I guess we're going to prove something now, right?
I think I'm always big on the human factor, despite the fact that I love to look at stats and numbers and stuff like that. And it is a lot. There's press. You're getting photographed. Everybody's in a suit or some sort of outfit. You look around and you see the greatness all around you and the money. I mean, millions of dollars up for grabs, and who couldn't use more money? So I do think that may impact him in some way.
All right, Joel, let's do Rafa versus Fritz.
Well, this is an interesting one. I think at both sides. I mean, Rafa's won 2 out of the 3 matches. The most recent, one of the best matches of the year, the fifth set tiebreaker that Nadal won at Wimbledon. Tremendous, tremendous match. Fritz, in the wake of that, though, he admitted a few weeks later that he was still haunted by that loss and had a first round loss to Brandon Holt at the US Open. That was an upset. And I think he's kind of a little lost his way. I mean, a little not quite playing as well these last few weeks. And I think that lingered and affected him throughout the fall. So I think it's going to be, but it's a fun match. I mean, Fritz beat Rafa in the finals of Indian Wells, a career defining win for Fritz. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm Taylor Fritz. I'm looking forward to the years to come to see how well he improves his transition skills, if he does at all. I'm still staggered from where I come from that a guy that tall with a great serve from Southern California does not have an appetite for the net. That's such a mind blower. That Rafael Nadal is better at the net than Fritz, and it speaks to some developmental things for all to consider. Someone who grew up on clay, but envisioned his game to expand his skill set. And so now let's see if the hardcourt guy can embrace his own kind of hardcourt legacy. This match, though, I think it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I'm not gonna predict someone, but I think there'll be a lot of good rallies because their matches have had a lot of good all court tennis. Reminds me a little different way of, remember when Nadal would play Del Potro? Faint.
Great rallies.
Yeah. Lots of movement.
So Fritz is another really strong backhand. Reminds me a little bit in that way of Nadal's last two losses, not to mention the fact that he's American. Frances Tiafoe and Tommy Paul. So I'm still looking for Nadal just to start defending out of his forehand corner. And then the interesting thing will continue to be Nadal's serve. You know, how will it look? Amy, you mentioned in the interview that Rafa said he was sick to his stomach in that third set against Paul. Did you see that he said that he hurt his ab again? He aggravated it, re-injured it right before the US Open. He said that as well.
No, I guess that one got by me.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep track of all the injuries. And, like in some ways, the Djokovic fans will say, why are the excuses always being made about Nadal and his injuries? And in some ways, it's kind of like, yeah, there's a point there because Nadal's getting older. The injuries are not, and Djokovic is too. The injuries are not going to be less frequent. They're going to be more frequent. So in some ways it's like, okay, it's another Nadal injury, but he's going out there and he's well enough to play. So let's just, kind of focus on that. But on the Fritz thing, I wanted to add that Taylor, he's just been a little bit unlucky. He had to play Brandon Holt, who is like his childhood friend, and he admitted this was hard for me to play. And I get that because
you can't lose that match though.
No, but it kind of opened up a window into his soul. It's like, oh, Taylor Fritz has like a sensitive chip in his body because I understand that. I hate playing friends, especially good friends. But give Brandon Holt a ton of credit. And then Fritz gets involved in a match in Paris in Gilles Simone's last hurrah, his last run in France, and he loses that one. I mean, so I think that probably to your point, Joel, he probably still is suffering some of the effects of that loss at Wimbledon.
It's funny though. I like playing my friends. I know they're my friends, so we can just do tennis business. It's kind of funny about that. I actually find it sometimes harder to play people I don't know as well because I don't know. It's almost like it's funny. It has to do with this thing with affinity and connection. And yeah, I covered that Fritz Holt match, and Brandon saw his opportunity because he knew him, but maybe it was opportunity because he was the underdog. So maybe that's part of it too. Whatever that means. I mean, Taylor Fritz was a seed, and here's Brandon had qualified, so it's a different dynamic. And then then you got Simone, but I think that's interesting ebb and flow of these matches.
Yeah, lots of power in Nadal's section, lots of good serve +1 in Fritz. Felix, and why am I forgetting? Oh, and Casper Ruud. They all have excellent serve plus one games that Rafa will need to contend with. Let's see how he looks. Hasn't really played well since Wimbledon, if we're gonna, be honest. Hasn't played
Well,
well
and also the thing we talk
for a
about
long
injuries.
time.
I meant to add this: the injuries. Like imagine you're an artist and took each of these 8 players and drew them as an automobile, and drew what they were like in their automobile. And Nadal, a lot of his career he's hasn't often been what I call right out of the showroom fresh. There's often stuff that's a little bit of the Nadal storyline, is the resilience and coming back from various injuries.
He's the old Porsche Roadster in that creamy white that has this beautiful patina to it. But, it's going to need a new carburetor soon.
All right. Okay. Good. Yeah, that's good. Okay. We may have to see what we see Novak is. Yeah. And Roger took his Mercedes. Roger took his vintage Mercedes, and just put it in the garage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. A sedan or a sports car, Roger?
He's a sports car.
Yeah, he's a sports car. He's not a sedan.
He's like but he's not a race car either. He's like a Bentley. In my view, right?
Well,
it's luxury. It's luxury. It's quiet. It's smooth. It goes fast, but it doesn't go fast like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. It doesn't sound like it's going fast. It just goes fast.
I just couldn't get the SUV out of my head, because that's what he did the commercial with all the kids in the back in the Mercedes SUV.
The commercial is not the personification of the tennis game, so we'll take this up around the Indianapolis 500 next year. That's an American expense.
Sounds good. Let's go on to Djokovic, but before that, I know, Amy, you mentioned like the idea of Nadal being always injured, and sometimes other fan bases not appreciating that is so much dominating the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I'll say, people can agree or disagree when we make assessments of what happened in a match. The one thing we're never, ever doing, I'll speak for myself, the one thing I'm never, ever doing is making excuses. I am not Nadal's defense attorney. I do not need to defend him. If I make an assessment that something happened in a match because he was not 100% and his serve looked bad, and I think it's because of the abs, I'm not making an excuse. I am making an analytical assessment. So it's just one of my least favorite responses sometimes that I see when I have an opinion is that I made an excuse. I am not Nadal's agent. I am not his defense attorney. I have never made an excuse in my life for any player.
Yeah, fair enough. And we're just speaking the facts. I mean, if these injuries were addressed in post-match press conference, we're going to talk about them as a fact. This injury may prevent this player from playing in the future, in the short term, or whatever. That's simply what we're talking about. We're not making really a judgment related to the tennis one way or the other.
All right. I will start with Djokovic in the red group. And my matchup is Djokovic-Medvedev, which we've seen many, many times. We last saw it in Astana. And I actually believe both players, knowing the psyche of tennis players, will probably feel like they won that match. I think Medvedev in his head thinks, I had him and I got injured. Totally had him, would have won. And I think Djokovic is thinking, I was going to come back. I had it. So I bet both players feel like they won that match in Astana. Obviously, only Djokovic moved on as Medvedev hurt his abductor. Luckily, it wasn't long term, and we'll get to see it again, which is fantastic because it's been such an interesting rivalry, which started as tactically very, very physical wars, and it was kind of 50-50. Medvedev won sometimes, Djokovic won sometimes, but it was always gripping, physical, long, really kind of like prime Djokovic grind fests, I'll say, because of how both of them played. Novak, at a certain point, I think it was Australian Open 2021, was like, look, this is not how I should be playing Daniil Medvedev. I have better weapons than him. I have more finishing skills, and I am going to take it to Daniil offensively, because if we are grinding, this becomes a 50-50. And I think I can tilt this more towards me. I'm going to drop shot. I'm going to serve and volley. I'm going to be aggressive with my forehand. Enough of this grinding. And that's how I think he's played recently. The thing is, sometimes that leads to errors. So Novak can sometimes make more mistakes. What I saw in Astana was Medvedev really trying to keep the ball on Djokovic's backhand to try to get back to that physicality in those long rallies, because Daniil felt, if I just keep it on your backhand, you can't really hurt me in rally. So I think there's a lot of fascinating dynamics. Djokovic has looked great. I thought he played a bad match against Rune. It happens. Not to take anything away from Holger. I just think Novak missed a ton of opportunities. And I think Medvedev, in general, has been very difficult to predict. I was very surprised by his loss to Alex de Minaur in Paris-Bercy, because he had looked so good, and it seemed like he was picking up momentum. He had won a title the week before in Sofia, I want to say. Am I getting that wrong? Let me check real quick. His title was in Vienna, Austria. He looked great. And I thought it was going to be a big Paris Masters, and it wasn't. So the up and down season continues in 2022 for Daniil Medvedev.
I think Medvedev is in a bigger way than I talked about Taylor Fritz feeling the aftermath of the tight loss to Nadal. I think Medvedev, well, the tight loss to Nadal in Australia, but I think a kind of haunted haze over him all year, both from that loss in Australia to Nadal, but also by seeing these other styles and things emerge. He's not quite, it's like there are ways Alcaraz and even Rune revealed sort of some of the tactical and technical limitations Medvedev has, not by beating him, but by showing others what they can do. And so I think Medvedev, because we talked about this a while ago, I thought Medvedev was looking a little bit like yesterday's news as Alcaraz bloomed. I mean, like, for example, even in the recent match with Novak, big point, 5 on that second set tiebreak, misses a very makeable forehand volley. I mean, and it was technically a bad kind of miss. And I'm just curious to see how Medvedev continues to up his skill set. What I so like about Novak is that he's always looking to add that 7%. And there are things he does. The base is so strong, and he looks to do things. I mean, it was over a year ago, that serve and volley effort in the Paris Masters versus Medvedev showed a lot about Novak and his openness to innovation, to expansion of his weaponry and his arsenal, and what that can mean for future tournaments too, both this one and also for majors. There's a little bit of a shadow over Medvedev this year.
And you add to that, of course, what he's been going through with the tensions and the war between his home country and Ukraine. Haunted haze is kind of a good, and he didn't even get to play Wimbledon this year. That's just brilliant analysis, Joel. I really like that. Novak is like, if Novak didn't know how to really hit a technically sound, I don't know, backhand volley right now. Let's say he was struggling with that, although he is very technically sound on that shot. He would go to work. I mean, he would say, I got to have this in my tool bag, and he would change what he was doing. Is Medvedev of a mind to do that kind of thing? And talk about a tall guy, Joel, who doesn't like the net. When you mentioned Fritz, Medvedev's even taller.
And he makes Fritz look like the second coming of Patrick Rafter up there. I mean, yeah. I think Medvedev, does he have the willingness, and does he also have the base from which to do that? That's one of the things that's so great about Novak. He has this technical base that allows him to say, yes, add volley. And so it's a little bit like a company with a great product, and Novak is going to say, we're going to take this percentage of our earnings and put it back into R&D each year. I mean, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Guys, I think it's a lost cause. I mean, we can talk about Medvedev's. I do. I really do. I really do believe that. Here's the thing. So
I'd love to ask him that in a press conference. Like, Medvedev, Gil says your volleys are a lost cause. What do you say?
Look, not everyone on tour is going to become a good volleyer.
Why
Well, they
not?
should.
They should.
Yeah.
Again, you talked about the base, Joel, and Medvedev and Novak are compared to each other often. They are polar opposites in technique.
Yep.
Djokovic is literally, this is a cliche, but literally what you put in the textbook. If you're trying to hit a two-hander, look at Novak.
Yes.
And that is true about almost every shot he hits.
Yes.
Even the serve, which like has never been what he's known for, is a fantastic, simple and sound motion. Everything. Medvedev, even the shots that are good, are not normal looking.
No, I mean, you notice how when he's also, you notice even sometimes when he's losing, he's like rushing the service motion. It's like, what are you, me at the park? You know what I mean? That's like, I know there's definitely a self-learned, taught aspect to Medvedev that's so different than Novak with his discipline and his practice routine. You're right. Medvedev is kind of like the triumph of the self-taught thing. So so I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe he'll learn a great swing volley.
Maybe it only sometimes is applicable.
That's kind of going out of vogue, especially in the men's game. Just, focus on this. Well, I mean, who am I to say? But just he's got so much height and range and wingspan. You would think that he would have a strong desire to. But, some people are a little bit more stubborn. Not that he is, we don't know, but they're set in their ways, and this wasn't a stroke that they felt passionate about. So maybe not.
Yeah, I just think it's too far gone. You look at that technique, and that's someone who's never going to volley great to me. And if he proves me wrong, that's awesome. Also, let's remember he's not young anymore, and I know he's kind of lumped into the young guys, but he's not. He's 26. He's going to be 27 very soon. It's Daniil Medvedev's in his prime right now. This is not really a young developing player. Let's go to the next Novak head-to-head. Djokovic Medvedev is going to be fascinating. Can't wait to see it again. Let's go with Djokovic Rublev, which Joel, you have.
It's funny. I did some research on this, and for some reason in my head, I would have thought they played each other more. They've only played each other twice. It's 1-1. The most recent, Rublev won. He beat him in Belgrade in the finals. I think we did a show right after that match, a 3-set final that Rublev won 6-0 in the third. This is kind of like Novak shaking off some cobwebs in the spring. And I think I'm less engaged by the tennis in this match than I am in some of the others. This match, there's something about prosaic, cross court, lots of cross court. Okay, Novak a little bit more margin indoors. I mean, it's just Rublev's a player. I really like him. I like his attitude. I like his humanness. There's a lot I like about him and how he conducts himself. And you see he's raw. I wrote a story about him last week. He's raw. He's human. He's emotional, but he knows that. And yet I'm not sure his arc, if he's going to be a 6 through 15 guy for his career, if he has that extra dose of unpredictability or weaponry to vault further. I mean, I look at them each of these guys has won 4 titles this year, Rublev and Novak, except Novak won that one in London, the one that Rublev couldn't play, the one that Rublev wasn't allowed to play. And Rublev, he's never gone past the quarters of the major. I don't know. I just, I see this match being kind of straightforward. That doesn't mean it won't be dramatic at times, but there'll be a lot of this. We'll see a lot of the same rallies.
So
I just think that a lot will depend on whether or not it's a good match will depend on Rublev's first serve, because Djokovic is such a great returner, and Rublev, there's a large disparity between his first and second serve. So if Novak can start getting into some of those second serve points, it's probably going to be a straight set win for Novak. But if Novak doesn't get to see a lot of second serves, then it may be a closer match.
I agree, and I just see that this matchup, Rublev, like Medvedev, has a line broadening challenge. Medvedev actually has some broader skills and things he does because of his self-taught strokes. Rublev is much more technically disciplined, close to what you would show, and yet he doesn't, his innovation index is pretty low for me. So that's why I wonder if he's going to have if he's kind of maxed out what he's going to be, and he's going to win plenty of titles and plenty of late stages of other tournaments. But again, the fact that he's 0-6 in slam quarters is to me a little bit of a yellow flag that he hasn't been able to find that extra gear.
Yeah, he's absolutely unequivocally for the last 3 years been a 5 through Joel, you did a bigger range. I think we can narrow it a little bit. He's been like a 5 through 9 player for 3 years now, ever since 2020, and there's been a line of demarcation. Hasn't really beaten top players, but he's a top 8 player the last 3 years. I think it's pretty easy to simplify his game. He hits very hard. He takes the ball very early, and he doesn't miss very much. There's not a lot of unforced errors either, which is an awesome combination. But to me, the way he has success is he rushes the player on the other side of the court. Like he's taking the ball early, he's hitting it really hard, and it's linear power. And I just think he faces some of these opponents like Djokovic and Medvedev who are pace absorbers, and it's just like, look, what Andre does, it doesn't bother us. So it does. It feels sometimes like there's a lot of matchup nightmares with Rublev, and it feels like he has a much better chance of getting into playing someone like Tsitsipas or Dominic Thiem, like a one-handed backhand who can sometimes get rushed on that side. That's the kind of player he can have success against, much more so than a pace-absorbing two-hander like Djokovic or Medvedev.
Well, and the human aspect, I mean, someone's going to be on against Rublev. I think if people who play him, they're well aware of that, but that's it. I think sometimes it's his imagination, and that's what I'm kind of intrigued to see how he embraces other parts of the game. If he wants to do that in the years to come. I mean, this game is pretty clear. It's pretty vivid. And if you watch Rublev play tennis, oh, so this is tennis. Okay. I mean, it's like, he's great. Wow, he's fit. Wow, he strikes the ball well. But it's pretty, and I see opponents, they get in a groove against him. He helps them feel tuned up. And if he's hitting it a little bigger than you and you're not, then you're kind of, on the trolley, as they say. But if you're in there with him, that's why I think, okay, he might be the one who's going to be he's the least able, I think, to streak his way to reaching the semis out of the round robin. See, I think I see some of these other players, Fritz or Felix, they slash a few balls, crack a few, hit a few big winners. Rublev, he's rational and thoughtful. He doesn't make a lot of bad decisions. He just, because he talk about lane acknowledgement. Lane recognition. He knows his lane.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a common misconception about Rublev, because people see him as this ultra aggressive player, which, yes, he is in terms of the pace, but he actually doesn't make a lot of errors. And you're right, Joel, he's very disciplined in his decisions.
It's not going for it when you own it.
Yeah, good point. All right, last matchup of our breakdown is Djokovic Tsitsipas, and here's Amy.
Yeah, it's a large body of work, right? Isn't it interesting how of these 8 players, some of them have just met so infrequently, and yet these guys, Djokovic and Tsitsipas, have met 11 times. Djokovic owns the rivalry 9-2. And the Tsitsipas couple of wins that he had were years ago, like 2018, around that time, when Novak may have been going through a dip at that time. So, some of their best matches, some of their closest matches have been on clay until Paris, which many said was Stefanos's best effort against Novak, his closest effort, and yet Novak still got the win in 3 sets. So I love this rivalry because I see this young player not giving up and trying to figure out one of the greatest players of all time. And he has had to adapt, and he is using slice more, which I noticed in the last match. He used to never have a slice. It's coming along. It's on a good trajectory. He'll have to use that on this fast, hard court. And I think he's starting to pick up on some of Novak's patterns. So it'll be on Novak to then change his patterns again. And I wrote an entire article about how Novak has done a masterful job when he plays Stefanos of getting him to cough up errors, not on his backhand, but on his forehand side. Well, that began to shore up the last time they played. He didn't make as many errors on that side. So I anticipate another great match. And maybe this will be the one that Stefanos is finally able to turn the tide.
Do we believe that the ship? See, I've looked at it in terms of Djokovic's success that a ship is only as strong. No, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Can that be true in tennis? Because to me, the Tsitsipas and Amy, I know that Novak goes to the forehand. He does that, and we've discussed this. You have to do it. If you just go to the backhand over and over again, you make the backhand better because it's not under pressure, and he runs around and hits forehand. So with that said, I still think the backhand is the problem in this head-to-head. It's the weak link on the court, and I think Novak finds ways to get to it. And maybe the backhand doesn't miss, but even if it doesn't miss, it's where the short ball comes from. It's where the attackable ball comes from. And like you could see it in that Paris tiebreak. If you watch the points, Djokovic missed. He made 2 errors trying to change direction on his forehand, trying to squeeze it into that backhand side. 2 errors with changes of direction down the line. Everything else to the backhand, Tsitsipas missed 1. He hit 2 bad trades that led to, short balls that Djokovic punished and finished with his forehand. So I just think, as much as these two have played a lot of really good matches, one shot, one ground stroke can't hang. And it's been the Tsitsipas backhand.
I would agree with that. And I would say, there's a course to be taught on Novak's tiebreak management. It's not the course. It's not the way everyone should always play every tiebreak, but just as a method of study of his lockdown, of his awareness, of his targets. And I think that Tsitsipas backhand, but the chain, the thing in tennis, though, that's the weak link, but that doesn't mean you just try to break that part of the link. You got to go to the other links to get, the whole way you build points. And you realize that the backhand isn't attaining the purchase that Stefanos would want. I see the slice coming along. I still think the technique is beguiling. It's strange to me. I don't quite get the whole technique. It's fascinating to me as someone of, again, I've said this before, of when I learned to play, that big time players are trying to gain technique on a shot that I think is like breathing. I mean, I think that it's like, but they're trying to get it and the grip and the racket and maneuver it. And in Novak, Novak's gone through his period with a slice where his slice has become reasonably fine, but it still looks, they all look for these guys. Novak, Rafa too with his, Stefanos, they're all learned. It's like learning a third language. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, slice, backhand, get racket, through ball, and underspin, and then understanding how it fits into the game. So I think, it'll be interesting to see how Tsitsipas seeks to continue to evolve that stroke. But Novak knows quite what to do and to weather the storm, because there's a lot to weather when Tsitsipas is playing well.
I would say, Gil, that on his backhand, it breaks down as a so-called weak link. It breaks down less frequently than you would think, because everybody tries to attack it. And as everybody tries to attack it, he hits it more and more and more. And like Roy Emerson said, the more you hit a stroke, the better you get at it. So it's kind of a push-pull. But I will give you this. On this surface, where we talked about low bounces and we talked about surface speed, however you want to put that mishmash, for his take back, the way that his technique is, it does become more of a liability.
Well, and to me, the liability is not just the missing, it's what it accomplishes for him. It's just like, is it doing the things that he wants it to do so he can have Novak do something that's more advantageous. So it's not so much, not just miss it. It's not that it's missing as much as is it really moving through the court or staying low or going deep or angled. So many times his backhand, it's not making any kind of statement. And that's therefore an anti-statement that's going to hurt him and get him running more.
All right. It's going to be really, really fun to watch these matchups play out. This was super fun going through them with all of you. Amy is frozen on my screen. Oh, there you are. You're back. Now I feel like I'm ready.
Maybe I was just sitting still. Maybe I was just sitting really still.
Yeah, now I feel like I'm ready to end the episode. It just didn't feel right on like a frozen Amy. So now we're all good. That'll do it for this episode of 3. Remember, we're available on all podcast platforms. We appreciate it if you leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube as well, like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you next time on the next episode of 3.